The smell of poverty had no place in the VIP section of Harrington National Bank. Yet there it stood, wrapped in a faded hoodie and torn sneakers, clutching a wrinkled envelope like a beggar clutching his last coin. Finn Archibald Carter was 14 years old, and every pair of eyes in that gilded sanctuary was burning holes through his threadbare clothes. Corbin Harrington saw the boy from across the marble floor and felt his jaw tighten. This was his kingdom, his temple of wealth, and some street urchin had just tracked mud across his red carpet. He excused himself from the investor he had been charming, straightened his $10,000 suit, and walked toward the disturbance with the measured stride of a man about to crush an insect. Well, well. Corbin's voice sliced through the hushed whispers, loud enough for every VIP customer to hear. It seems we have a little lost puppy in the wrong pound. He circled Finn slowly, examining him like a specimen under glass. Tell me, son, did you wander in here looking for spare change? Perhaps you thought this was a soup kitchen? Scattered laughter from the wealthy patrons. Finn's face burned, but his feet stayed planted. Sir, I have an account here. I need to make a deposit. He held up a worn plastic card. My name is Finn Archibald Carter. Corbin snatched the envelope from Finn's hands before the boy could react. He shook it near his ear, letting the pathetic rattle of coins echo through the silence. His lip curled in disgust. An account here. He opened the envelope, peered inside, and let out a theatrical laugh. Ladies and gentlemen, come see this. The boy wants to deposit what appears to be pocket lint and bus fare. He dumped the contents onto the counter. Coins scattered and rolled. A few crumpled bills fluttered down. The VIP customers leaned in, phones appearing, smirks spreading. Let me explain something to you, boy. Corbin bent down until his face was inches from Finn's, his cologne overwhelming, his eyes cold as granite. This bank was built by people who matter, people who create jobs, who move markets, who shape the future, not by people who count pennies and wear shoes with holes in them. He flicked a quarter off the counter, letting it spin and fall to the floor. That's probably worth more than everything your family owns combined. Someone laughed loudly, others joined. Finn felt the heat crawling up his neck, felt the sting behind his eyes that he refused to let become tears. Now pick up your charity case and go back to whatever gutter you crawled out of. The regular section is that way, though frankly, even that might be too generous for someone of your circumstances. Corbin turned to walk away, already dismissing the boy from his mind. Ma'am. Finn's voice was quiet but steady. He looked at Amanda Lewis, the teller frozen behind her screen. Please, just enter the account number on this card, that's all I'm asking. Corbin spun back around, irritation flashing across his face. Amanda, don't waste your time. We have actual customers waiting. Please. Finn held the card out, his hand trembling but his gaze unwavering. Just look. Corbin laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. You know what, fine. Let's give the boy his moment. He gestured grandly to Amanda. Go ahead, enter his little fantasy account. Let's all watch the screen show zero balance, and then perhaps he'll finally understand that daydreams don't pay bills. Amanda hesitated. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Something in the boy's eyes, some quiet certainty that didn't match his ragged appearance, made her type the numbers. The screen flickered. A new interface appeared, one she had never seen in her 6 years at the bank. Her face drained of color, her breath caught in her throat. The words glowed on the screen, Primary Beneficiary, Finn Archibald Carter, Harrington Legacy Trust. Below it, a number with so many zeros that Amanda had to count them twice, a number attached to the Harrington family crest itself. Amanda looked at Finn. She looked at Corbin. She looked at the scattered coins still lying on the counter, worth less than a rounding error compared to what the screen displayed. The laughter died as if someone had cut its throat. The phones lowered, and Corbin Harrington, the man who had just called this boy a gutter rat, stood frozen with his mouth half open, watching his entire world tilt sideways. Finn picked up the quarter from the floor, placed it gently on the counter with the rest of his coins, and spoke in a voice that carried across the suddenly silent room. "I believe you were saying something about people who matter, sir." The city that housed Harrington National Bank existed in two distinct worlds. Downtown rose in towers of glass and steel, the bank's headquarters standing tallest among them. 6 miles east, past the highway overpass, a different world breathed and struggled and survived. The houses here leaned against each other like tired workers at the end of a double shift. This was where Larissa Carter raised her 2 children in a single room that served as kitchen, bedroom, and everything in between. Corbin Harrington had never driven through this neighborhood. At 45 years old, he had inherited his position, his wealth, and his unshakable belief that poverty was a personal failing rather than a circumstance. His hair, silvering at the temples, swept back from a forehead that had never known manual labor. He appeared on television during charity events, writing checks large enough to generate headlines while his bank quietly raised fees on the very communities those charities claimed to serve. His employees feared him. His board of directors tolerated him. And somewhere deep in the bank's legal archives, a man named Henry Collins guarded secrets that Corbin had never bothered to learn. Henry was 50 years old, gray-haired and soft-spoken, with eyes that missed nothing. He had worked for Corbin's father before Corbin was born. He had helped Enoch Harrington, the bank's founder, draft the original charter 60 years ago. And he alone knew about the trust fund that lay dormant in the bank's deepest records, waiting for a specific name, a specific date, a specific test of character that Enoch had designed decades before his death. The Carter family knew nothing of trusts or tests. They knew about survival. Larissa Carter was 34 years old, though the lines around her eyes suggested someone older. Her hands bore calluses from the industrial pressing machines at the laundromat where she worked the overnight shift. But every morning when she came home, she found the strength to smile at her children, to check Bridget's homework, to brush the hair from Finn's forehead and ask about his day. Finn had inherited his mother's dark eyes and his grandfather's stubborn chin. At 14, he was thin from meals skipped so his 8-year-old sister could eat more. He was quiet from years of learning that poor kids who spoke too loudly attracted the wrong kind of attention. But behind that quiet exterior lived a mind that devoured numbers the way other boys devoured video games. Bridget, 8 years old and perpetually curious, drew pictures on the backs of junk mail envelopes. Her favorite subject was their grandfather, Archibald, a man she had never met but had heard about in her mother's stories. Archibald Carter had been dead for 9 years, but his presence filled their small room. His photograph hung above the hot plate, showing a man in work clothes with grease-stained fingers and kind eyes. He had spent 40 years as a machinist, eventually working in the private workshop of a young entrepreneur named Enoch Harrington. The story of what happened in that workshop, the accident, the rescue, the promise made between 2 men from different worlds, had been passed down like a sacred text. Finn had heard the story 100 times, but only now. At 14, had his mother given him the envelope his grandfather had left behind. Inside were specific instructions, a plastic card with numbers nearly worn away, and a letter written in Archibald's careful handwriting. "Go to Harrington National Bank on the anniversary of its founding," the letter said. "Go alone. Go to the counter nearest the main glass doors. Do not be afraid if they look down on you. Let them show who they really are, and trust that your grandfather has provided for you, even from beyond the grave. Finn read that letter every night. He believed in his grandfather. He believed in keeping promises. When the radio announced that Harrington National Bank would celebrate its 60th anniversary, Finn knew the time had come. He gathered his savings, $47.38 earned mowing lawns and carrying groceries. He added the strange old bills his mother had given him. Currency he did not recognize, but that the letter insisted must be included. He sealed everything in an envelope and walked 6 miles to the glass towers of downtown. The walk took nearly 2 hours. His feet ached by the time he reached the bank's revolving doors. But when he saw the red carpet and the crystal chandeliers and the people in suits who moved through the lobby like they owned the air itself, something in Finn's chest hardened into determination. He would not be turned away. His grandfather had sent him here for a reason. The security guard, William Zane Parker, intercepted him at the edge of the VIP section. William was 42, broad-shouldered, with the tired eyes of someone who had seen too much pretension. He had worked security for 15 years, long enough to recognize the difference between troublemakers and kids who simply did not know the unwritten rules of wealth. "This area is for VIP customers, son," William said. Not unkindly. Finn showed him the card and pointed to a line in his grandfather's letter. "It says I need to go to the counter nearest the main glass doors. That's this one, isn't it?" William studied the boy's face, the determined set of his jaw, the absence of defiance or deception in his eyes. Something told him this was not a prank. Something told him to step aside. "All right," William said quietly. "But if Mr. Harrington comes over, I can't protect you." Finn nodded and walked toward the counter where Amanda Lewis waited, unknowingly poised at the threshold of a revelation that would change everything. The chaos that followed Amanda's discovery moved too quickly for anyone to process. Corbin snatched at the keyboard, demanding to see the screen. But the system had already sent an alert to the one person who would know exactly what it meant. Henry Collins received the notification in his office on the 14th floor. His coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. The boy had come. After all these years, Archibald Carter's grandson had finally come. Henry moved faster than he had moved in years. By the time he reached the VIP section, a crowd had gathered around the counter where Corbin was demanding explanations. "Everyone step back, please." Henry's voice carried the authority of someone who had been managing crises since before most of these people were born. "There's been a technical issue that requires immediate attention. The VIP counter will be temporarily closed." Corbin whirled on him. "What do you think you're doing, Henry? This is my bank, and I'll handle whatever." "This is the Harrington family bank," Henry interrupted, his voice quiet but unmistakably firm. "And the person standing at that counter is the primary beneficiary of the Harrington Legacy Trust. I suggest we continue this conversation somewhere private." The color drained from Corbin's face. He had heard of the Legacy Trust vaguely, assuming it was an accounting relic from his grandfather's eccentric youth. He had been wrong. The private conference room on the 14th floor smelled of old leather and older secrets. Finn sat in a chair too large for him, his grandfather's envelope still clutched in his hands. Henry sat across from him, folders spread between them, photographs and documents telling a story 6 decades in the making. "Your grandfather saved my employer's life," Henry began. "In 1963. Enoch Harrington was working late when his sleeve caught in a pressing machine. The mechanism was pulling him in. Archibald Carter didn't hesitate. He reached into that machine and pulled Enoch free, tearing muscles in his own arm. The injury cost him promotions and opportunities, but he never complained. He never asked for compensation." Henry turned a photograph toward Finn. 2 young men stood in a workshop. one tall and fair, one shorter with a bandaged forearm. They were both smiling. Finn stared at the photograph. He had seen pictures of his grandfather before, but never this young, never standing beside the man whose name now adorned buildings and charitable foundations across the city. Enoch never forgot. Henry continued. When the bank succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, he created the Harrington Legacy Trust. Its purpose was to ensure that Archibald Carter's family would never face desperate poverty. Your grandfather knew about this trust. Enoch gave him the card and explained the conditions. Archibald could have used it himself, but he refused. He wanted it saved for his grandchildren. But why the conditions? Finn asked. Because Enoch worried about what would become of his own descendants, whether they would treat ordinary people with respect or contempt. So he built a test into the trust. The beneficiary had to arrive alone, without obvious wealth, at the most visible location in the bank. Whoever was in charge would reveal their true character through how they treated an apparently poor child. Henry's expression grew serious. Corbin failed spectacularly, and according to the terms Enoch established, that failure has consequences. 6 miles away, Larissa Carter received a phone call that nearly stopped her heart. A woman from the bank explained that her son was safe, that he was sitting in a private conference room discussing matters related to his grandfather's account. Larissa's hands shook as she changed clothes and caught a bus downtown. They brought her to the conference room where Finn sat surrounded by documents worth more than every paycheck she had ever earned combined. The story spilled out. The accident and the rescue and the trust fund and the test. Larissa listened with tears streaming down her face. Not because of the money, but because her father had found a way to protect the family he loved even from beyond death. "What happens now?" she asked. "That depends on Finn," Henry replied. "The trust gives him options. He can accept quietly and let Corbin remain in charge, or he can invoke the full terms of Enoch's will, which includes provisions for removing any Harrington heir who demonstrates contempt for working people." He turned to Finn. "You're 14 years old. No one expects you to run a bank, but you have the right to decide what kind of institution this becomes." Finn looked at his mother. He thought about the laughter in the VIP section, the way Corbin had shaken his envelope like it contained trash. "I don't want revenge," Finn said slowly, "but I don't want anyone else to feel the way I felt today." By evening, the video Callista Green had recorded was spreading across the internet. She had posted it with a simple caption describing how the bank's owner treated a child at his VIP counter. Within hours. It had been viewed hundreds of thousands of times. The responses were overwhelming. People who had never met Finn saw themselves in his worn hoodie. They heard their own humiliations echoed in Corbin's dismissive words. Former customers began sharing their own stories of being denied loans, charged excessive fees, or turned away because their income fell short of the bank's unstated preferences. Corbin's public relations team scrambled to contain the damage. They issued statements about misunderstandings. They offered to meet with community leaders, but the story had escaped their control. The board meeting convened 3 days later. 12 people sat around a mahogany table as Henry Collins presented his findings. Enoch Harrington built this institution on a specific philosophy, Henry explained. He created the Legacy Trust to ensure that his descendants would never forget where their fortune came from. The projector showed a handwritten letter, Enoch's final instructions. "If any heir of mine should treat working people with contempt," Henry read aloud, "then they have forfeited their moral right to lead this institution. The trust beneficiary shall have the authority to call for their removal." Corbin sat at the far end, his face a mask of controlled fury. "This is absurd. A 60-year-old document cannot override modern corporate governance. The trust predates the current share structure, one board member replied. It was written into the bank's founding charter. The provisions are enforceable, another member added. The public relations damage is catastrophic. If we don't take decisive action, we risk a crisis that could threaten the bank's survival. Henry cleared his throat. There is one more element to consider. Finn Carter has asked to address this board before any final decisions are made. I believe we owe him that courtesy. They brought Finn and Larissa into the conference room. Mother and son sat at the end of the table opposite Corbin. Thank you for letting me speak, Finn began. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because 3 days ago, a man I'd never met decided I was worthless because of how I looked. He paused. My mom works nights at a laundromat. My grandfather lost the use of his hand, saving someone's life. Those are the kind of people Mr. Harrington laughed at. Finn looked directly at Corbin. I don't hate you, sir, but I know what it feels like to be treated like garbage because you don't have money. I'm asking this board to remove Mr. Harrington from his position, not to punish him, but because this bank needs to remember why it was built. The vote was unanimous. Corbin Harrington was removed as CEO, reduced to a minority shareholder under board supervision. An interim leadership committee was established with Henry Collins as temporary chairman. The press conference announcing these changes drew reporters from every major outlet in the region. Finn stood at the podium, Larissa beside him, Henry just behind. The same lobby that had witnessed his humiliation now hosted cameras and microphones hungry for his words. 3 days ago, I was just a kid trying to make a deposit, Finn said. I didn't know anything about trusts or legacies or corporate boards. I just knew that my grandfather had asked me to come here, and I trusted him. I still trust him, and I think he would want me to use whatever power I've been given to help people who feel as small as I felt that day. He announced the creation of the Archibald Enoch Fund, named for both men whose unlikely friendship had made all of this possible. The fund would provide emergency assistance to families facing medical crises or unexpected job losses. It would offer scholarships to students from low-income backgrounds. It would sponsor free financial literacy classes in communities that had been ignored by traditional banking. My grandfather used to say that being poor isn't shameful, Finn concluded. What's shameful is treating people badly because you think your money makes you better than them. This bank forgot that. We're going to help it remember. The months that followed brought changes that would have seemed impossible on that Friday afternoon when a boy in a worn hoodie first approached the VIP counter. The red carpet was removed, replaced by a welcoming area where anyone could sit regardless of their account balance. The VIP section was redesigned into a community space, its walls decorated with photographs of the bank's founders and the working-class neighborhoods they had once called home. New account types appeared, specifically designed for customers with limited income. Fees were reduced or eliminated. Loan officers received training in evaluating applications from people without traditional credit histories. The bank that had once catered exclusively to the wealthy began actively seeking customers it had previously ignored. Larissa Carter was invited to join the Community Advisory Board, a new body created to ensure that policy decisions reflected the needs of ordinary people rather than just institutional shareholders. She was terrified at first, convinced that her lack of formal education would make her useless among the executives and financial experts. But Henry Collins assured her that expertise came in many forms, and no one understood the reality of living paycheck to paycheck better than someone who had done it for decades. You don't need to speak their language, Henry told her. You need to speak the truth. That's more valuable than any MBA. Finn, meanwhile, refused every ceremonial position the board offered him. He did not want to be young beneficiary director or junior trust representative or any of the other titles they invented to acknowledge his unique status. He wanted to finish high school. He wanted to learn about finance properly, through study and effort rather than inherited privilege. He wanted to earn whatever role he might eventually play in the institution his grandfather's sacrifice had helped create. But he did accept one responsibility meeting with Corbin Harrington, alone, in the same conference room where his fate had been decided. Corbin looked different from the man who had shaken that envelope of coins with such contempt. His suit was still expensive, his watch still gleaming, but something in his posture had changed. He sat like someone who had lost a fight he did not know he was in, confused and diminished and struggling to understand how a child in torn sneakers had upended his entire world. "I suppose you want an apology," Corbin said flatly. "No, sir." Finn shook his head. "I don't think you're sorry yet. You're angry and embarrassed and probably scared about what happens next. Apologies don't mean much when they come from those feelings." Corbin's jaw tightened, but he did not argue. Henry had given Finn a copy of a letter Enoch Harrington had written to his descendants shortly before his death. Finn slid it across the table now, watching Corbin's face as he read words from a grandfather he had clearly never truly understood. "I was once a young man with oil on my hands and debt on my shoulders." The letter read, "I built this bank because another man's courage gave me the chance to try. If you are reading this, you have inherited the rewards of that chance. Please do not forget its cost. Please do not become the kind of person who looks at working hands and sees only dirt. They are the hands that saved my life. They deserve your respect." Corbin read the letter twice. His expression shifted through stages of denial, recognition, and something that might have been the first stirring of genuine shame. "I never knew the whole story," he finally said. "My father mentioned Archibald Carter once or twice, but only as a footnote. Just some worker who helped my grandfather once." "He was more than a footnote to my family," Finn replied. "He was everything." The silence stretched between them, filled with 60 years of history neither had fully understood until now. "I'm not going to pretend I forgive you," Finn continued. "What you did hurt, and I don't think I'll forget it anytime soon. But I also don't think people are just one thing. You were cruel to me. That doesn't mean you have to be cruel forever." He explained his proposal. The bank was starting financial literacy programs in underserved neighborhoods. They needed teachers, people who actually understood money and could explain it clearly. Corbin had decades of experience in finance. He could use that knowledge to help kids like Finn learn things that schools never taught: how to budget, how to avoid predatory loans, how to build something from nothing. "You want me to teach poor children about money?" Corbin said, his tone hovering between disbelief and offense. "I want you to do something useful with what you know," Finn replied. "And I want those kids to see that rich people aren't all like you were that day. Some of them can actually help." Corbin did not answer immediately. He stared at the letter, at his grandfather's handwriting, at the words that accused him of becoming exactly what Enoch had feared. "I'll think about it," he finally said. It was not acceptance. It was not redemption. It was the smallest possible step away from who he had been, towards someone he had not yet figured out how to become. Finn nodded. It was enough for now. 1 year after the confrontation at the VIP counter, Harrington National Bank looked like a different institution. The lobby still gleamed, but its walls now displayed photographs of community events rather than just portraits of wealthy founders. The staff had changed too, trained in a new philosophy that valued every customer equally regardless of their account balance. Larissa Carter no longer worked overnight shifts at the laundromat. Her position on the Community Advisory Board came with a modest salary, enough to rent a small house in a better neighborhood, enough to ensure that Bridget never had to choose between medicine and meals. She still woke early every morning, old habits dying hard, but now she spent those quiet hours reviewing proposals and preparing questions for board meetings where her voice actually mattered. Bridget, now 9, had decorated her new bedroom with drawings of her family's story. There was Grandfather Archibald pulling young Enoch from the machine. There was Finn standing before the bank's doors. There was their mother speaking at a podium while important people listened. She had started calling them the family that changed the bank, and no one had the heart to correct her exaggeration. Finn returned to Harrington National Bank on the anniversary of his confrontation with Corbin. He wore a clean shirt and new jeans, purchased with money he had earned tutoring younger students in mathematics. His sneakers were new, too, though he had kept the old ones in his closet, a reminder of where he had started. Amanda Lewis recognized him immediately. She had been promoted to branch manager since the reorganization, her competence finally valued above her willingness to tolerate executive misbehavior. She smiled genuinely as he approached, not the forced professional courtesy of a year ago, but the warm recognition of someone she actually liked. "Mr. Carter," she said, a hint of teasing in her formal address. "Welcome back to the VIP section, though I suppose the whole bank is your VIP section now." Finn laughed. "Please, just Finn, and I'm not here as anything special. Just wanted to see how things have changed." They walked through the renovated spaces together, Amanda pointing out the community bulletin boards, the children's corner with books about saving and spending, the new staff members recruited specifically for their connection to neighborhoods the bank had previously ignored. William Zane Parker was still at his post near the door. He shook Finn's hand firmly. "You know," William said, "that day when you showed me the letter and asked to go to the VIP counter, I almost said no. Figured you'd just get yourself in trouble." "Why didn't you?" William shrugged. "Something in your eyes, I guess. You looked scared but not defeated. Like you knew something the rest of us didn't. Turns out you did." Finn smiled. "I didn't know anything. I just trusted my grandfather." On his way out, Finn passed the community center where the bank's new financial literacy programs were held. Through the window, he could see a classroom full of children from the neighborhood he had grown up in. Kids with worn clothes and second-hand backpacks and the same hungry curiosity he remembered from his own childhood. At the front of the room, pointing at a whiteboard covered in simple diagrams about interest and savings, stood Corbin Harrington. The former CEO was not transformed. He still wore expensive clothes, still carried himself with the posture of someone accustomed to authority. But his voice, audible even through the window, had lost its dismissive edge. He was explaining compound interest using examples involving allowance money and birthday gifts, meeting his students where they were rather than demanding they rise to meet him. Finn watched for a moment. Corbin looked up, saw him through the glass, and paused mid-sentence. The two held each other's gaze across the year of change that separated them. Finn nodded, a small acknowledgement. Corbin nodded back, something like gratitude flickering briefly in his expression before he returned to his lesson. The boy who had been mocked for his poverty and the man who had mocked him had not become friends. They probably never would. But they had found a way to exist in the same world without one needing to destroy the other. That was more than most stories of this kind could claim. Finn walked home through streets that looked the same as they always had, but somehow felt different now. The poverty had not disappeared. The struggles had not ended. People still worked too hard for too little, still worried about bills and rent and the 1,000 small cruelties that money could inflict. But something had shifted. A bank that had symbolized exclusion now represented possibility. A family that had been dismissed as worthless now sat at tables where decisions were made. A boy who had been laughed at for his worn sneakers had proven that dignity could not be bought or sold, only given freely to those wise enough to recognize it. Archibald Carter had never lived to see his grandson's triumph. Enoch Harrington had never known whether his test would ever be administered. But across the decades, their unlikely friendship had woven a safety net strong enough to catch a family falling through the cracks of a system designed to ignore them. The day Corbin Harrington humiliated a poor boy at the VIP counter, he thought he was teaching a lesson about money and power. He thought he was demonstrating the natural order of things, the rightful hierarchy of those who had and those who had not. Instead, he became the lesson. His contempt activated a trust fund he had never bothered to understand. His cruelty revealed a character flaw that cost him everything he thought he valued. His certainty that poverty equaled worthlessness was proven wrong by a 14-year-old with holes in his shoes and a grandfather's promise in his pocket. The Harrington Legacy Trust was never really about money. It was about memory. It was about ensuring that wealth did not erase the truth of where it came from, that success did not excuse cruelty, that the powerful could still be held accountable by the powerless if the right mechanisms were in place. Finn Archibald Carter inherited a fortune. But more importantly, he inherited a responsibility. He inherited the proof that one act of courage, performed decades ago by a man who expected nothing in return, could echo through generations and change the lives of people not yet born. He inherited the knowledge that his grandfather had never stopped protecting him, even from beyond the grave. And he inherited the understanding that true wealth was not measured in bank accounts or stock portfolios, but in the dignity you extended to others and the integrity you demanded of yourself. The bank that bore the Harrington name would never forget that lesson again. Neither would the boy who had taught it to them.